So I reviewed quite a few episodes of the newest season of Doctor Who at this point, the 11th season starring Jodie Whittaker as the 13th incarnation of the character, and seeing as how the latest episode that I reviewed is the 5th episode of the 10-episode season, and we are halfway through this new season of the show, I figured I'd take a step back and discuss my feelings on this new era of Doctor Who in its entirety up to this point. Keep in mind, I haven't watched the latest episode of the show, at least the latest one, as of when I'm recording this. I don't remember the title of it anymore now than I did in my most recent single episode review, so I'll try to remember to put it up here on the screen. I keep hearing that it's really good though, so I'm looking forward to finally watching it once I've finished recording this. Point is, this video is being made from the perspective of someone who has only seen up to the 5th episode of this season and no further. You know, just in case I bring up an observation or a criticism which is addressed in a later episode. First of all, I want to talk about the show itself in its current state. I am really loving the production values this season. Doctor Who and other BBC shows have always been known to be a little artificial looking, especially compared to the American television that I'm more familiar with. And while Doctor Who tended to be better than the average, it has never really been free of that. Watching Doctor Who has always felt like you're an audience member watching a TV show. Even in the best produced episodes, there's always been a sense of artificiality to everything, especially when something computer generated needs to be on screen. While CGI in later seasons of the show has vastly improved over earlier seasons of this new modern version of the show, it's never really looked great. And that's just something that as a Doctor Who fan we've always had to accept. But in this latest season, not only are the camera angles more immersive, not only is the direction overall more creative and just generally more cinematic and appealing, the computer effects just in general are vastly improved. It's still TV CGI, it's not movie quality stuff, so it doesn't look perfect, but it looks so much better than it used to. The CGI creatures and creations in the show now look so much more like they're actually there with the characters. It really helps me to feel immersed in this world. Almost like I could be right there with the Doctor, doing the things that the Doctor and her companions are doing. And the expansion of the cast to 4 people rather than just 2 or 3 has also helped with that, I think. Giving the Doctor more companions, a more diverse group of companions with complex relationships with each other already built into their characters. It feels a lot like the early days of Amy and Rory over again. Now there are companions with the Doctor who, in the background of an episode, can have interactions with each other that don't involve the Doctor at all. It makes them much more effective audience viewpoints when they can analyze things from the perspective that the audience might be analyzing them. And there being more of them, you're more likely to relate to one of them, which also serves to make them more effective audience viewpoint characters. And while this does mean that we see less of the Doctor interacting with her companions in any one-on-one kind of sense, which I do feel is a criticism of this new format, I would like the writers to find a way to work in more one-on-one interactions between the Doctor and her companions. It also allows, in a well-written script, for the Doctor's little group to branch out and experience more of whatever location they're visiting all at once within the 40-minute span of the episode. Take the most recent episode that I've watched, at least, the Saranga Conundrum, I believe it was called. Is it Saranga or Saranga? I can't remember. That episode was really good about giving every single one of the companions something to do, with each of those somethings feeling meaningful and also building the world pretty effectively. We got a better look at the environment, and that worked as really effective world building. It's also allowed the show to keep focus on the people. With so many principal characters to flesh out, you have to devote a lot of time to it. So you have to write stories which feel smaller, more personal, more reflective of the things that the characters are going through. But I do think that that's a bit of a double-edged sword. It can be a strength, but it can also be a weakness. Sometimes Doctor Who just doesn't feel like Doctor Who if it's only telling a personal story. A story about individuals first and the monster/problem of the week second. Sometimes that monster/problem has to take the forefront. And there hasn't really been an episode this season so far where that's been the case. While the writing, especially the character writing, has been pretty consistently solid, save for a few foibles that I'll talk about in just a little while, the character stuff so far this season feels like the kind of character stuff that could have happened if these people had stayed on Earth. Like the adventures that they're going through that we're experiencing along with them are just an interchangeable backdrop, and I don't think that that's a good thing. Yes, the Doctor herself has had a very palpable impact on these people's lives, and I think that they definitely feel bettered for the experience, but I want to see some of the situations have a direct impact on them as well, which is something that we haven't really seen since the season premiere, and a little bit in Rosa, I guess. Like, Ryan was definitely impacted quite a bit by the stuff that happened in Rosa, and then everybody was impacted pretty heavily by the end of the episode, but the impact that that episode had on them didn't really carry over into anything that followed. The loss of Graham's wife, Ryan's grandmother, Grace, from the premiere is really the only thing that we've revisited from their earlier characterization, which has come about as the result of something that the Doctor was embroiled in. There's also the question of the Doctor herself, and to discuss the Doctor, to classify this new version of the Doctor, I want to revisit my old TARDIS test. It's popped up, I think, once before here on the channel. It's something that I put together for my old blog, which you should not go looking for. It's terrible. And it primarily consists of 3 questions that one must ask themselves to determine whether or not this version of the Doctor is for them. The TARDIS test asks, 1. Do you find the Doctor to be more appealing or more put-offish? 2. Do you trust the Doctor with your life? And 3. Does any average adventure that this Doctor has become embroiled in ignite your sense of adventure? Applying the test to this newest incarnation of the Doctor, and keeping in mind that we're supposed to be imagining our first encounter with this character and nothing beyond that, I think that this Doctor passes. She's not the huge jerk that her predecessor was. In fact, she's quite kind and considerate and soft-spoken compared to some past versions of the character. Yeah, she still talks down to people a little bit, and yeah, she can be a little spacier than past versions of the character, that is, the put-offish part of the character, but every Doctor should be some balance of both an appealing character and a put-offish one. The Doctor is an alien and should feel like an alien. But like the majority of her predecessors, this Doctor finds a balance between those qualities, one which still manages to present her in a mostly positive light, at least at first glance. All 3 of her current companions liked her company so much that all 3 of them came back to the TARDIS to ask to go with her on her journeys. There was no reluctance in them at all, and I think that that makes sense. I do think she is a likable enough incarnation of this character that makes sense. And to address the second question, this version of the Doctor is just as competent as past versions have been. Yes, this season has technically had a casualty of a companion of sorts already, but after that initial encounter with the Doctor, I would be perfectly willing to believe that she is someone who would put my safety above virtually everything else. Yeah, she does admit that she can't guarantee the safety of anyone who travels with her, but she does seem like she cares about the safety of the people traveling with her, and like she is capable enough to protect them. As for the third, that's a big yes as well, I think, with the exception of the giant spider episode, which was just absolutely horrifying. There has been something thrilling about every single adventure that this Doctor has gone on so far. Yes, there's been danger, but there's always danger. And so far, I do feel like the adventures that this character has taken her companions on are appealing enough that they're worth the risk. And yet, after having watched these first 5 episodes of the season, I don't want to pass this version of the Doctor. I don't want to declare definitively that she has passed my TARDIS test, for the simple reason that I'm genuinely worried about some of the Doctor's more recent attitudes. If you've been following my reviews of the season so far, you will know all about this one particular hang-up that I've been having. The Doctor has always been a character who looks to talk their way out of problems or find an otherwise peaceful solution before resorting to violence. To claim otherwise would suggest a gross misunderstanding of this character, but I'm starting to worry that the writers on this season don't understand why that is. The reason why the Doctor always looks for the peaceful solution first is because they made a vow to do so. And the only reason that the Doctor made that vow in the first place is because the Doctor knows that if they did look to violence first, it would be horrifying. It's the entire reason why the Doctor has tried so hard to forget their true 9th incarnation, the one which fought the Time War, because he was the Doctor who fought, the Doctor who resorted to violence first, and it left the character horrified by their own actions. The reason that the Doctor looks for the peaceful solution first is because the Doctor's true nature is not to. And yet, so far, the writers on the show this season have been writing it as if the Doctor's core nature is one of a pacifist. This version of the Doctor is so pacifistic in nature that even in a situation where it would be beneficial for some of her allies to have weapons, she insists that they don't keep them. She insists that they don't carry or use them. Yeah, the Doctor has always been kind of against guns and weapons, but never this much. Never to the point that in the season premiere, the Doctor insulted anyone who would have the gall to carry a pocket knife, which is more tool than weapon. This is the same character who used to be scientific advisor to a military group and took pride in that. Because while he knew that he wasn't suited to carrying a gun or any other true form of weapon, for that matter, he respected the people who could, for the greater good, without allowing that to corrupt them. And I'm really hoping that this is just a character flaw in the Doctor that they're hoping to explore later on in this season, or maybe in the next one, since this season isn't supposed to have an overarching plot, and that therefore all of this is intentional. But I'm really starting to worry that the writers are just trying to make a statement. That the writers on this season, particularly the new showrunner Chris Chibnall, are redefining a core aspect of the Doctor's character so that they can make a political statement. One which they could still make perfectly well without doing that. Without, I think, diminishing the character overall. Between the end of Arachnids in the UK, where the right choice, objectively speaking, would have been to put the giant spider, the giant mother spider, out of her misery as she was guaranteed a long, slow death, where despite that the Doctor still objected to doing so. And the 5th episode, in which the creature was literally impossible to kill through violence, and therefore the Doctor could fight against it without technically breaking her rules of pacifism, I have actually started to rethink my answer to my second question: do I trust the Doctor with my life? I am genuinely starting to worry that if the Doctor is put in a situation where she has to choose between the life of her companion and the life of an enemy, that she would hesitate and let one or more of her companions get hurt or killed rather than just kill the stupid monster. Like maybe it's the Pating from episode 5, or maybe it's one of the spiders from Arachnids in the UK, something which is only acting on instinct and isn't technically evil. But maybe it's the toothpaste guy from the premiere. Maybe it is someone who you could look at and objectively call evil. Like maybe they won't always be evil. Maybe they haven't always been evil. But right now, they're evil because what they're doing is evil. I keep asking myself, do I think that the Doctor would kill such a being if it meant protecting her companions? And my answer right now is I don't know. But if the writing in episode 5, again, where they wrote the creature specifically to be indestructible so that the Doctor couldn't harm it, is any indication, I don't know that we're ever going to see them put in this situation to begin with, because if the writers aren't intending this to be some character trait of the Doctor's that they're going to explore in more detail later, they won't want to put the Doctor in that situation, and so the Doctor will just never end up in that situation to begin with. And you may say, well, good, problem solved then, right? But I would disagree, because I remind you, this trait seems to be in contradiction to the Doctor's core characterization throughout all prior seasons of the show. Simply rewriting this trait and then writing all of your future episodes so that you never have to acknowledge that you rewrote that trait. That is bad writing, and I don't want to see it in my Doctor Who. There's also the issue that the Doctor has been something of a hypocrite in virtually every episode so far this season. Like, actually, I hadn't planned to do this, but let's go through them one by one and look at this in detail. There was the toothpaste guy in the premiere. Yes, he harmed himself with his own weapons, but the Doctor did allow himself to put himself in a situation where he could do that without telling him, and you could argue that that is violent. Then, despite the fact that the Doctor didn't want guns used against the weapons on that deserty planet in the 2nd episode, she did put those talking shroud things in a situation where they would all burn to death, despite the fact that they seemed artificially intelligent at the very least. In Rosa, she didn't say a thing when she found out that Ryan basically did the same thing to the villain that one of the Weeping Angels would do to one of their victims. In Arachnids in the UK, she was so anti-gun that she was against putting the suffering mother spider out of its misery. And in Saranga Conundrum, even though the Pating was indestructible, it took her a really long time to take any direct action against it. And then when she did, even though she couldn't kill it using the plan that she came up with, the plan that she came up with was still technically violent. She still tricked it into swallowing a bomb. I hope that my glimmer of a suspicion is wrong, and that all of this is leading up to what I think could be one of the greatest character studies of the Doctor in history, where this odd bit of hypocrisy is addressed and explored and resolved. But I honestly don't know if that's going to be the case, and it does have me worried about the show going forward. All of that said, though, objectively speaking, I do think that this has been a quality season overall. At the very least, it's got me thinking and talking about it, hasn't it? And isn't that what's really important when it comes down to a sci-fi show like Doctor Who, a show which is part of a genre which exists to get people talking about stuff like this? And so I do have every intention to keep watching the show and keep talking about it, at least for the foreseeable future. It's clear that this is a very new kind of Doctor Who, that the new writers and production staff want to leave their own mark on the series, but at the same time it still feels like Doctor Who to me, and that's really what's important. Though I will also say that I do hope we get some stories that are a little more like classic Doctor Who peppered in here and there. Something like the Saranga conundrum, but with an enemy that's a bit more threatening than a hairless hamster that eats spaceships. As per usual, though, I'd like to know, what do you think of the newest season of Doctor Who up to the midway point, or I guess you can talk about episode 6. I will have watched it by the time this video goes up. Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over my Discord, linked in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.